Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, Peak Performance Coach Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Well, welcome everyone to the Bamboo Lab podcast. Just to go through some analytics for this week, we are recording today this interviewing session on the 10th of November, 2022. We are currently being viewed and listened to and broadcast on 6 continents, all 50 states, 39 countries, and 946 cities. So I want to read a heart letter from a Bamboo Pack member, and I will summarize it. This gentleman emailed me and said, I had back-to-back conferences this week, and there was a lot of windshield time. Usually it's 80s and 90s rock music, but this time I chose the Bamboo Lab. Thank you. And I want to thank that member for reaching out, and I love that. We took over 80s, 90s rock. That's a pretty tough standard, so I appreciate that. All right. Today we have an amazing guest. I've been excited to talk to this lady for the past few weeks. We started communicating maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. And I've been excited about this opportunity, and especially because she's a Youper, and we're doing this podcast on the 47th anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And every person in the Upper Peninsula, and probably most people in the country, know the Edmund Fitzgerald and the lives that were lost. And most of us are connected to it, if not from the Upper Peninsula or Michigan, we're connected to it by the Gordon Lightfoot song. So there is that. Today we have Sharon Kennedy. Sharon is a local author. She's been writing poems and short stories for 50 years now. But interesting thing about Sharon is she never really published anything till much later in life. She earned her BA in English at Wayne State University in Detroit. And in 2001, she received her master's from Northern Michigan University. Go Wildcats. After teaching English composition at Bay Mills Community College and Lake Superior State University, she began writing a general interest column that still runs in local newspapers. She's written several books, and I want to just take a shout out to her most recent one, View from the Side Road, a collection of Upper Peninsula stories. So I'm not going to go on long because I want to hear her talk, and I'm excited. I don't know much about Sharon, but I just know enough that it's intrigued me to want to know more. So Sharon Kennedy, welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Hi, Brian, and thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to your listeners.
Well, great. Well, we're looking forward to it. So I always ask the question at the beginning, can you tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am 75 years old, and as you mentioned, I started writing many, many years ago. But I didn't really do anything with it. I actually grew up on a farm in the 1950s. I never did milk a cow because my grandmother always said that my hands weren't strong enough. Now, my brother didn't believe that when occasionally I would give him a little punch every now and then. but my hands, she said my fingers weren't strong enough. So, okay. I rarely went to the barn. My sister, Jude, who is 4 years my senior, she was the gal who helped with the milking, took off hay, drove tractor, and I was the house cat. I stayed inside, played with my dolls as a little girl, and read books. I actually still live on the same land that I grew up on. Oh. I live on the original 20 acres that my dad homesteaded in the 1920s. We had about 35 acres. My sister sold her 40 acres. And my brother, he still lives on 80 acres. It's mostly forests now. But when we were young, we took hay off of that field. And that's where we summered our Herefords. We had probably a half a dozen Herefords and only 9 or 10 milk cows. And we always called them milk cows, not dairy cows. Dairy cows was something maybe that the fancy people did, but farmers up here in Chippewa County, they were milk cows.
Milk cows.
So that's just a little bit about my childhood. It was isolated because there were only 4 or 5 families on the road, and 3 of us were related. And so I had a cousin that was 2 years my junior, and we didn't have much in common. And so basically I read, I played in my playhouse, and grew up very isolated. And that probably helped me in later years to do some writing. But it didn't give me a lot of self-confidence being alone so much of the time. And I think that's why when I was older and started writing, excuse me, I didn't do anything because I didn't have any self-confidence that my stuff was any good.
That's interesting that you say that. Can I? We're going to get to that point, but can you, for a few minutes, I'll ask this question when we get to that stage. I'd like you to think about what gave you the confidence to eventually start writing more and publishing more. But we'll get to that question in a minute. But so growing up isolated in Chippewa County, and I'm so amazed by how many people that I speak with grew up in small communities or on farms that really turned something magical into their life later on. But what or who was your greatest inspiration back then?
Well, it has to be a what, because my friends were the characters in Nancy Drew. Sometimes I was Dale Evans, sometimes I was Annie Oakley. It really kind of varied upon the book that I was reading. So those were my probably my greatest influences were the characters. And I read a lot of those little golden books. I think a lot of people grew up with the golden books, and we loved those things. And what else? My mother encouraged me, but not necessarily as a writer. She encouraged me to get out of the house and climb one of an apple tree that was close near us, and just to experience more life outside instead of inside with my books all the time. So that was and Dad just laughed. He didn't. My grandmother, his mother, was a reader, and he said, "Oh, you're just like Ma." He said, "You'd rather read a book than do anything else." And so maybe it was my grandmother, unwittingly, when I saw her read. And the funny part about it is, she loved Nancy Drew books too. So whenever we went to town, I was probably in my 12 years old, maybe even a preteen. She would give me $1 and say, "Now, Shooter," that was her nickname for me. "Now, Shooter, go pick us up a Nancy Drew book if they have any new ones out. And if they don't, well, at least buy something for yourself." So Graham would fall asleep reading magazines, and they would actually cover her face. And so sometimes I would sneak into her room and put a new book by her bedside, which always made her happy when she awakened and saw a new Nancy Drew book or something else, even a Hardy Boys in those days. So maybe it was my grandmother as well as other authors who wrote these wonderful children's books.
I think you're the third person so far in my guests, or maybe 4, have said that their true inspirations growing up were characters in books. And I think for myself that they definitely played a primary role in my development. And I was a big Hardy Boys. And I'd go to the library once or twice a week, and I'd get 2 or 3 Hardy Boys and just devour them. And then I turned over to another series that was a mock-off of Hardy Boys, which was the Power Boys. And they were 2 brothers, but they were just called, the last name was Power. It was primarily the same books, just a little bit different names in the characters. Little golden books. My mother still has all of mine at the house. And my daughter's read them. I think my son's read a few, and he was younger. So they'll probably get passed down to my grandson soon enough.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Let's give it a try. I don't like doing ads.
You have to.
Okay, here we go. We're all still trying to figure out what we want to be when we grow up and how to grow in our life and leadership. In fact, it was from that struggle that our podcast was born, Career Sweet Spot. Mm-hmm. I'm Steve Perkins, the founder of Greenhouse Coaching, and together with my team, we explore topics like, this is my favorite, how to create your ideal calendar.
Yeah, I know, but if you really want to have more fun, you might want to enjoy the episode, How Do You Talk About Yourself? Because no one knows how to do it.
That was a true listener favorite.
That's right. We coach a lot of people in companies, so we like to share some of those topics and conversations on our podcast. So why don't you just press pause and hit subscribe to Career Sweet Spot, a podcast about life and career growth.
Well, you're very fortunate. I don't have any grandchildren, and since I was a reader and an English major, I had one child, Stephanie. She was born in 1982, and I started collecting books for her long before she was born. And just recently, this past fall, she said, "Mom, I'm never going to have kids. Okay, you might as well start selling my books." She had over 500 books. And little by little, I got rid of most of them. Some of them I just didn't want to part with, but most of them went, and a lot of them went to grandparents who said, "I want my grandchildren to have the experience of holding a book in their hand, turning the pages, writing along the margins if they want to, and have that whole experience that is not based on something digital." So the books all went to good homes. And that included the little golden books, and some of them had my name written in them from when I was a child. And it was kind of comical because sometimes my name would be crossed off, and my brother would have written his name, and his nickname was Bucky because he was born one day before deer hunting season began. And so I would laugh when I look at those books because it was like, was it Sharon's or was it Bucky's? I guess we'll never know because they're long gone now and in the library of some other little kid in the Upper Peninsula.
And that little kid probably has his or her name written on it now.
Yes, beyond a doubt, I think, beyond a doubt. And it was in the 10th grade. I'll jump to that. We had a teacher, an English teacher called Eugene Buckley. And poor Mr. Buckley wore the same clothes, I think, every day for the whole school year. He was not a wealthy teacher. Now, that would have been probably 1962. I think that's when I was in 62, 63. I was in the 10th grade. And one day he was disgusted with us kids because we didn't know one reader from another, or one author. Okay. And he brought in a grocery bag full of books, and he said, "All right, people, you're going to pick one book and you're going to read it." So, okay, we all went up and we picked a book. And I chose this book that by an author I'd never heard of before, who was called Charles Dickens. And the book I picked up was Great Expectations. And the reason I picked it up was because it was peach-colored with green writing. Green was my favorite color. And I thought, Great Expectations. Now, that sounds like something that I would really enjoy because I wanted great expectations in my life. I wanted something beyond the side road and the cows and the smell of manure, especially chicken manure, which you can never get rid of. And it's hard to believe nowadays, but in those days, kids just did not have the access that they have today to all kinds of literature, with the flick of a key, the touch of a button. They have the world at their fingertips.
They sure do.
Well, Mr. Buckley, he gave us Dickens, and I am forever grateful to him for that.
And that little character Pip in that novel sticks with you. He stuck with me for many years. What would you say is the most impactful book you've ever read?
Oh gosh. I read so many of them. Wuthering Heights impacted me. But then Moms of Human Bondage. I don't know how old I was. I think I was in my 20s when I read that. And I wrote, I was being a bit melodramatic, and I said, Sharon Kennedy is, part of this book. She is bound, human bondage. O'Neill's plays, Long Day's Journey into Night, I could relate to in many ways because it was tragic on so many different levels, and it was that dysfunctional family.
Mm-hmm.
And although our family wasn't as dysfunctional as many in the UP, there was alcoholism, was a part of it, functioning alcoholics, and all of my relatives were drinkers in those days. And I'm trying to think here of some others. Faulkner. I fell in love with Faulkner when I was probably in my 30s and devoured just about anything he had ever written. And that was because I loved his stream of consciousness. I loved the way he used words that are totally archaic. Nobody can read Faulkner without a dictionary nearby. He's just a phenomenal writer. And I have a couple of stories that I have written in that stream of consciousness where it just flows. And it's almost like Faulkner has become my muse. So there's a lot of writers. Dickens, I went through a period when I wrote very, very long, coherent sentences like Dickens would, and tried to pick out characters who would have a twist, not Oliver Twist, but who would have a twist when you think perhaps that they were not worth saving. They would do something spectacular, and then you would change your mind about that character. So there's been a lot of authors that have influenced me. I do have to admit that I'm not much of a reader of modern day writers, and I've been chastised for that. But for some reason, I turn back to what I call the old masters. Mm-hmm. And at my age, I want to reread some of the books I have written to see how they relate, and if they do relate, to some of my. Now that probably sounds arrogant, but at my age, I've never been arrogant in my life, and I suppose I don't know how much time I have left. So a little arrogance and a little self-confidence, I suppose, is going to stand me in good stead where I didn't have it growing up.
No, I think you've earned a little arrogance and self-confidence. I think you've earned it, Sharon. And I'm going to, for the reader or the Bamboo Pack member out there listening, I'm going to include a link to Sharon's books in the text body of the podcast, so you can click on that and buy them and read them. I know I'm getting. I think Victor, is going to be sending me all the copy of all the books, and I'm definitely going to sit down, especially the view from the side road. I like those short stories of Upper Peninsula people and families, and I can see why you connect with Wuthering Heights. Obviously, we all grew up in a somewhat dysfunctional family, and of course those two families there were dysfunctional in the story, and a lot of abuse in the stories, domestic abuse and verbal abuse and things like that. So I can see how some of those stories will really you connected with. I had some of the same types of stories. I've read Great Expectations and Wuthering Heights, but it's been so many years. I don't have a lot of that's a book. That's really all I can remember from both books is the character and Pip and him being accosted, and Great Expectations, and of course Wuthering Heights just dealing with I think it was a son-in-law that was troubled or something, and there was some dysfunction in there. So, Sharon, the last 3 years of our world and country, 2 to 3 years, have seen a lot of change in dynamics and people's paradigm. What have you seen as the greatest learning you've taken away from these past couple of years?
Well, probably the greatest thing that I've learned is that our country's in trouble. And in my newspaper columns, I usually write nostalgic pieces and about the good old days and, do I really want to dust today, the furniture, and what's in my junk drawer, and things like that a lot of people my age relate to. But in the past month, I was writing more political pieces. I just felt an obligation that I could not sit still. I have a platform. The newspaper, Yahoo, picks up some of my columns, puts them in various places. And I thought, the country that I know, first of all, it changed with the killing of JFK. And then it changed in 1968 with, his brother and Martin Luther King. There was so much unrest, but there wasn't even with those murders, the assassinations, there wasn't the level of hatred that I see in the world today. It's not just in the U.S., but it is prevalent. I'm very fortunate that I live in a small town. People get along. I had no problem when I voted on Tuesday. I've had no problem with people coming up or throwing anything through my windows, tomatoes, bricks, anything like that, because not everyone on the side road agrees with my politics. And I've reached a point where I'm not even sure what they are anymore. I used to be a Democrat, but the Democratic Party has changed so much that I don't agree with a lot of the things that they're putting forward. So what I see is a level of anger, unrest, intolerance towards family members even who disagree with each other. And I wish that were not so. And I hope with the election now, we know that in some states, things have not been decided, and it might be another week or two before. But I hope whoever rules the Senate and the House, I hope there's some sort of camaraderie that can be re-inspired. The way it used to be, I wish statesmanship would be part of our political arena. I don't like all the fighting. I don't like the name calling. There has to be a middle ground. If we want our democracy as we know it, and it is not perfect, I think we all know that. But if we want it to survive, we have to learn how to compromise and how to listen to each other. So many times within a marriage, people don't listen to each other. They hear the words, but they don't hear the meaning because they're too busy thinking of a response that would be a negative response usually. So in these past 3 years especially, I don't want to mention any particular name, but I think we all know that there is a man who was our president who, I say, scratched the underbelly, because he got in touch with people who are sick of things, politics as usual. They're sick of all the elderly people that are in both houses who are not perhaps in touch with the reality of today. But I think there just has to be a calmer way of looking at things where we can come to an agreement that we're not perfect, but we want this form of government. We want to have a democratic republic as opposed to, an oligarchy. So that's in my little corner of the world, I'm isolated from so much. I lived in Detroit for about 15 years, so I'm familiar with, large cities. I lived in Colorado Springs for about 3 years when I was first married in the late 1960s. I lived through the Detroit riots, the Cicero riots, Haight-Ashbury. I was never a flower child. I always worked. But I've never seen the level of hatred that's in the U.S. today. And I hope very fervently that it does not continue, because I just don't think it's a good path that we're headed on.
And I agree with you. And I have the privilege of talking to so many people through my work that when we talk politics, when you really break it down, and we never, obviously with clients, I do not debate politics. I don't share my political views often with them unless they ask. But what I find is no matter what side of the aisle they're on, the vast majority of us actually want the same thing. We just think this different sides just have a vast way of getting to that point. And I hope and I believe, because it normally does, the pendulum always tends to swing back to somewhat of a moderate level when we get to these extreme positions like we're in today. It tends to swing back to moderation at some point. And as you've mentioned, I think the best thing you said was we need a calmer way of looking at things. And I think that's advice not just for our country, but like for ourselves individually, and as you mentioned, husband and wife, within families. So I love that. This is a question.
Well, and I think, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think that through listening to each other, and we care about each other. Okay, we care about our country. We care about the people in the country. And I really do believe in the goodness of man. I believe that every person wants that peace. To fight, to argue, to put down is very, very draining. It's emotionally draining. And when a person is emotionally drained, they don't have the energy to put forth some of those good vibes. It's just easier to go one of two ways, I think, to become either completely apathetic or, jump on the rage wagon. But that can't last.
No, it's not
sustainable. And I think the pendulum, it will swing back. I do. I hope so. So far, as we've seen here in Michigan, I don't have real TV. I don't have a dish or the network there, whichever one it's called there. It's been so long since I've had anything. I just listen to YouTube, and I listen to both sides. I will listen to President Trump's rallies. I will listen to Tom Hartman. So I try to get, a fairly good idea of what the sides are thinking and try to focus on what we can agree upon.
I think that's a good strategy. I think we all need to take a little bit of a dose of that medicine right there. Sharon, this next question is one I ask every guest, and I always give the guest the opportunity to opt out and say pass. But if you decide to answer, could you explain, if you decide you'll answer this question, the question is, what is the most difficult thing you've gone through in life? And then how did you overcome it?
Well, I thought about that, and I've had a fairly easy life. I've been blessed with good health. But the thing that pains me is when I see people struggling with illness, any kind of illness. And I think the hardest thing that I had to endure was watching my mother lose her short-term memory. My dad passed very, very quickly, and he was only 72. And that was an unexpected death. So it was hard, but we knew that, that he hadn't suffered. But with my dear mother, she spent 5 years at a nursing home. And occasionally, I would call her. Usually I would visit her, instead of making phone calls. The last time I called her, this is what she said when they put her on the phone. I'll remember these words till the day I die. She said, "My dear, I have no children, and I hope you find your mother." Those words absolutely tore at my heart, and they still can bring tears to my eyes after all these years. I think dementia. Mom did not have full-blown Alzheimer's. She could still beat me at casino. She loved to play casino, the card game.
Yeah.
And rummy. She a few days before she passed, she could still beat me. She would get me mixed up with her sister Kate. But her spirit knew that she was loved. And it was just that she couldn't remember that she had two daughters, and a son. And she actually went back to her maiden name when she was in the home. She wanted her maiden name put on her door. But the saying that she had no children and that she hoped I found my mother, it cut me. And I think anyone who has experienced this with their parent or any other loved one, it's difficult. And though I've had ups and downs and disappointments in life, nothing cut me like that did. And thank you for asking that question.
Well, of course, and thank you for sharing it. I can see that innocent statement from her perspective could be such a cutting wound that may never fully heal for you. That's tough. I'm sorry you had to go through that, and I appreciate you sharing that with me today.
Well, you're very welcome. And there's one other thing I'd like to share with your listeners.
Please.
And this is never give up. Absolutely never give up. Whatever's been nagging at them, whatever little voice they've heard that they've been trying to push down, listen to it. Maybe they want to write stories. Maybe they want to paint pictures or be a sculptor. Maybe they want to whittle, sing, dance, or even try out for a role at a local play. Go for it, is my advice. if I could start writing a newspaper column at 66, self-published 2 years later, and have Victor Volkman, a wonderful, wonderful man from Modern History Press, think that my books were worth his time, effort, and money to publish. If I can do all that at 66 and continue at my age, then anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. Young, middle-aged, older, make those golden years truly, truly golden, and leave a legacy for your children, your grandchildren, and even your great-grandchildren that they will have forever. It will be there long after you are gone.
I love that advice. Because what I see so often, Sharon, it's not even people who are technically in their golden years, but even young people who are in their late 20s or 30s or 40s, they start to see themselves as, it's too late. I missed my opportunity. I missed the train that went by. And no, you didn't. More trains are coming. There's always another train coming. Find the one you want to get on and get on it at this point. And as you said about Victor, I've gotten to know Victor over the past month, and he is an amazing man. I'm really appreciative that he reached out to me and has been sending me books of authors and that I can review and bring on the podcast if necessary, if it works out. So I think that's such good advice. No matter whether you're 19 or 109, it's never too late. You're going to be 1 year from now, you're going to be 1 year older. So it doesn't matter. You'd rather be 1 year older chasing those passions and chasing those dreams, and you're going to get that age regardless. And you can't go back in time, but you can definitely decide what you're going to do with your life from this exact moment forward. I think that is probably the best advice anybody could be given. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, and there's one other thing I'd like to say too before we close, is that when it hurts me greatly when young people give up. They give up. I wrote a column called "Climb the Hill, Climb the Mountain." Okay, I took a class, a hiking class, when I was 52, earning my master's degree and waiting for my directed study, and I say to people, climb the mountain. I was old then, but I didn't let on that, hey, I was just as spry as those girls, the young people that were climbing that mountain with me. And so I say to people, don't give up. Don't give up. Regardless of whatever is coming at you, whether it's a health problem, whether it's the breakup of a boyfriend or a girlfriend, whatever it is, a death of a loved one, never give up. Cry. Okay, I've shed many, many tears. I used to say I had shed enough to fill Lake Superior, but that was an exaggeration. I've shed enough to fill Lake Erie. Okay? And I still weep. But I weep not for myself, but for those who have given up. So never give up. Remember Churchill? Just continue to fight. Never give up. And thank you, Brian, for this beautiful opportunity to speak with you, to share some of my thoughts, and to hopefully leave on a very positive note.
Well, I'm not letting you off yet. I have a couple more questions. I'm going to learn more about you. You're sharing too much good stuff, Sharon. I can't just say we're going to leave now. You have more to share.
I'm Irish. I'm Irish.
I
if
love
you know
it.
anything about,
I do.
You know the Irish.
Oh,
we're never short on words, and we love to talk.
Well,
and
good.
We love a good story. I heard many a good story growing up, and that's why I put some of them. People shall remain anonymous, but some of them in my books.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, so with this, you have such a positive outlook on life. I really find that refreshing. So with that, what is a win for you in life? What do you consider a triumph?
Well, the triumph is getting up. That's an easy one. It's getting up every day, even when I don't want to get up, even when I've got some aches and pains. Even when I think, oh, not another day. It's cold in here. I live in a mobile home. That's why I called my first book Life in a Tin Can, because my dad always called this joint a tin can. You know, I grew up in the old house and we burned wood. And, of course, it was always cold in the wintertime because we had the kitchen stove that was wood. And when, Mom banked it during the night, but when it went out, it was freezing in there. And we had an old Junger's oil heater in the living room. We called it the front room. And we didn't have anything in the far front room. No heat barely got back there. In those days, everybody called their living room the front room. And we were not a very creative family, so the far front room was simply the far front room. Okay, and we had an upstairs. And in the morning, I'd wrap my clothes around there to warm them up a little bit. And then I'd run down the stairs and jump from rug to rug. And it's things like that, that have made me realize that the way I was brought up, I mean, we had an outhouse until I was 21 years old. We didn't have indoor plumbing, okay? And my brother often says, what a crazy way we lived. Dad worked at the locks, we weren't poor, but my parents didn't agree on things. And Mom wanted a new house, and Dad said, well, we can't afford a new house. We'll fix up the old house. And Mom said, I can't stand a mess. So their deadlock lasted until Mom was 51, and Dad was 7 years up on her when they bought this mobile home. And I've got to tell you, I forget what you just asked me. I got so carried away.
No, it was, you answered it was, what is a win for you in life? And you said getting up in the morning. It sounds to me like some of those real simple pleasures that most of us take for granted.
Yeah, and getting up in the morning to a house that, that's warm, okay?
That's warm,
It's cool in the summer, and it's, even though I don't have air conditioning, and it's warm in the winter, because when I think back to all of those 21 years of, the trip to the outhouse in the morning, and breaking that layer of ice in the water pails, that were on one of the tables, that was a real challenge, but I'm telling you, it prepared me for anything that life wanted to toss at me.
I understand. When I be going to deer camp here in a few days, I'll be staying at one of the camps I'll stay at. We have an outhouse, and we run off of a generator. So I experienced that not as often as you did, but I do experience it on occasion.
Yeah. Well, people ask me, the good old days, weren't they wonderful? And I think, honey, they might have been wonderful if you had a beautiful home and a flush toilet, okay?
Indoor plumbing.
They weren't so great otherwise, but they've given me stories. I was telling my brother the other day, I said, if we hadn't have grown up the way we did, I wouldn't have some of these stories. How could I talk about, cracking the layer of ice in the water pail, or Mom putting the butter dish in the oven, so the butter would soften up, and then she'd forget about it, and so it was like soup, okay, or the cat sleeping on top of the wood pile next to the stove, and sometimes he would jump from one table up to the top of the refrigerator where we had an old time radio. And the radio was always on to W. Sue. And so the cat would sit on top of there and stay warm. I mean, you don't have these kind of memories if you didn't grow up this way. And I love it. I had the old house taken down a number of years ago. And since there was nothing in it that couldn't be buried, the fellow who took it down buried it. So the old house is buried right here on the 20 acres. And the barn I sold a number of years ago. It was once a log cabin, and the fellow that bought it, he didn't want the haymow part, which was just boards. He wanted the actual cabin part, which we didn't even know was a cabin until he took it apart. And he paid a good price for this cart load. Well, it wasn't a cart; it was a trailer load of old-time logs that he was going to put together. So there you go. A little bit of my history is buried here. A little bit is in Indiana. And, some of these books, whoever reads them, could be from one coast to the other.
I'm guessing when I read your books and your short stories, I get a sense already of what I'm going to be, just the way you formulate your stories. I have a sense of that's how you write. Because as you were talking about the going out to the outhouse in the morning, and the cat sleeping on the wood stove and jumping from up to the top of the refrigerator, and the butter being melted in the stove. I mean, I was visioning all this. It was almost like I was watching a movie as this was happening. I was picturing the cat jumping and the butter in the stove. So you have such a great way of formulating a story, and I'm looking forward to reading some of your books when they come. Hopefully they'll come this week before I leave to go to deer camp.
Well, thank you. And the stories are mostly short. Okay, when I was writing in my 20s, I never wrote past 11 pages. It was like, okay, this is what I have to say. I said it. Okay, then I put it in a folder, and I wrote the date that it, might have been 79, 77, 80, and then I put it away. And I never did anything with them. Okay, I did have one story. It wasn't a story. It was an article published by in Monthly. I don't even know if it's still available or not, but it was called Monthly Detroit. And it was a monthly magazine that was published in Detroit. And I wrote about an artist called Ron Walford, who at that time had his studio in the original Trapper's Alley, on Monroe Street there, where Trapper's Alley was actually where the trappers in the old days, brought their pelts. And Ron rented the upstairs. He rented and he lived there. And he was truly a typical starving artist, because he quit his draftsman job at Fruhoff, where he made good money, and followed his dream. We've lost touch over the years, but he became a painter, a wonderful painter. And I do when I write my stories or when my columns even, I tell a story. I often think that my columns are simply a microcosm of a short story, because they do have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what I try to do. I try to write as if I were, as if we were friends, as if the reader was sitting right across from me, identifying with what I was writing and saying, I get it. Hey, she knows what I'm talking about. And sometimes I do. And sometimes, I don't. But in some kernel of that story, a person can find something to relate to.
I love that. I have a question for you. You talk. We've talked a lot about not giving up and climbing that mountain. Go for it. A lot of my listeners who are maybe in their 20s or 30s right now, if you could share with them from your perspective in life, what would you say would be the best advice you could give them? Some recipe for success, perhaps.
Well, in my 20s, that was kind of a transitional period for me. I got a divorce. I got my bachelor's from Wayne State, as you said. I entered the Army. I decided that I wanted to go home, so I cried my way out of the Army. And in those days, a trainee could get a military discharge, an honorable discharge. I came home. I had these dead-end jobs. I worked for lawyers, and then I worked for Senator Regal, who was the U.S. Senator from Michigan, and he had an office in the McNamara building on Michigan Avenue in Detroit. Excuse me. But the thing I think I would say to them is, you're very young, okay? College may not be for everybody. Okay, if you want to go into a trade, go into a trade. If you are writing, don't necessarily show it to your friends and your family, because they can be your biggest critics. Trust your gut. Okay, trust your gut regardless of where it leads you. I was a grasshopper. I hopped from one idea to another, to another, to another. And it didn't do me any harm. I didn't stick with a job for 30 years. Okay, so if you find that you're bored with one job, it isn't answering something that your gut is telling you that you want, that you need, try something else. You have nothing to lose. I always say an opportunity could be waiting right around the corner for you. Don't give up. Turn that corner. Write that book. Okay? Take a cooking class. Maybe you want to be a chef. Maybe you want to train horses. there's all kinds of opportunities that you people, the young people, have now that I never had. I could have been a secretary, a nun, a teacher, and I always forget the fourth one, a nurse. Well, sick people made me sick. I fell in love when I was 7 years old with a little boy who sat at my table, so I decided I couldn't be a nun. Okay? I was told that English teachers were a dime a dozen in 1968. So I just got a liberal arts degree, which qualified me, excuse me again, for nothing. So the last thing I did was, I was a secretarial, and I was a good secretary. Okay, I was a crackerjack secretary, but I came to work early to write my short stories, and I stayed late to work on my short stories. This was before I got actually a friend of mine pilfered an old-fashioned typewriter from the City County building in Detroit. No, we never told anybody that, okay?
I think the statute
that was my artist friend. He said, Sharon, you need a typewriter. You can't, keep working on the weekends, in longhand. So he did. He pilfered this old typewriter.
Well, I think the statute of limitations is over on that one, has ended on that one. I think you're safe.
I think so. And he's since passed on. So, I've outlived a lot of, as Mom said, she was going to live out all of her friends and most of her enemies, and she succeeded. Well, I don't think I have any enemies, and I hope I don't outlive too many of my friends. But that's my advice: never give up. Go for it.
I love that.
Be a grasshopper, okay? Forget drugs. That's a dead end. I never got into drugs. And I never burned my bra because I was always too busy making money to buy a bra, so I wasn't part of that. I had a fit when gas went to 99 cents in what was it, 1979, something like that, when I lived in Detroit. So just keep plodding along. Put one, sometimes just getting out of bed in the morning is a major accomplishment. Okay, just having, you don't even have to wash your face. You don't have to shower every day. Okay, just do those tiny, tiny, tiny little things, and then say, oh, well, I'll wait one more day, and then wait another day, and then another day, and then scribble down something or whittle something. Write a poem. Okay, write the grocery list. Sometimes when I was so depressed, that's all I could do was write a grocery list, but at least I was writing.
Just take those steps, turn those corners, climb those mountains. Don't give up. Go for it. I mean,
bingo. That's what I can say, because when I know people. My niece committed suicide when she was, I don't know, in her 30s, and there's no coming back. It's not like in the movies. There's no coming back. So hang in there, because things may take a long time to get better. Took me a long time to discover that I was a columnist and that my short stories had some merit. I may never write a novel. Okay. I may never climb. I don't even want to climb Mount Everest. Climb a little hill. Just find something to get up for. Find something to hang on to. Find joy in the fact that you have all your teeth. Okay, or that you can hear with your ears, that you can taste with your food, that you can digest. Those are simple things. And to people who feel great and have never experienced one day of depression, it may sound crazy. But I'm talking now to the people who really need that lifeline. If I can hang in there, okay, if I can do it, you can do it.
Thank you. I think so many people needed to hear that last few minutes of what you just said.
And sometimes that's all we have are the words that we say.
Yep.
And I heard people say that your ears will believe what your mouth says. So if you say positive things, your ears are going to hear that. Eventually it will go from your mouth to your ears to your heart. And I am not a Pollyanna. Believe you me, I am not a Pollyanna. But in order to get through the days, we have to find something positive. And for me, this right here, this podcast has been, it's been something I've looked forward to, and it's something that has really, really perked me up. So thank you.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine, Sharon. What you just said about you're not a Pollyanna, but and I think so many people confuse a positive attitude and a positive outlook as being Pollyannish. Well, in reality, why do we believe that a negative thought is any more real or realistic or true than a positive thought? It's every obstacle we face is just an opportunity if we look at it that way. Even if it's something that happened to you that wasn't of your own choice, some people have gone through some very difficult times, and it isn't the brick wall that we face that's the enemy. It's it's the obstacle. The obstacle is how we're going to deal with it. Are we going to turn around and walk away with our head down, or are we going to scale that brick wall? It's always our choice. And I think being positive and optimistic and going forward, climbing that mountain, that's not Pollyannish. That's just the proper way to look at obstacles in life. It's the only real way that's going to help anyone.
Yeah. Once again, I interrupted you. That's another Irish trait. It's a survival technique. It's an absolute survival technique. Okay, because there's always a way out. Okay, there's always a way out, but just wait. Don't rush it. Don't rush it. And people survive any way they can. Okay, these are not easy times with prices being high. I have a very meager income, but I say that's okay. I didn't plan for my dotage. Okay, and we get by with remember Mr. Macabre?
No.
Okay, I loved his advice. Okay, and this not only applies for the money that's in your wallet or the lack of it. But he said, if your annual earnings are 20 pounds and you spend 21, domestic disaster. But if your annual earnings are 20 pounds and you earn 19, or you spend 19, that's domestic bliss. And that's the same attitude that we have to have with our talents. If we only have a little tiny, tiny talent, but we use it, we're blessed. We're blessed, and we're going to make it.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Well, before we do wrap up here, to the Bamboo Pack member out there, for the first 5 heart letters we receive via text, message, email, whatever they might be, we'll get from me a free copy of Sharon's latest book. I think the latest one is The View from the Side Road, right? Yeah, View from the Side Road, the collection of Upper Peninsula stories. So please get up there, send those letters, and the first 5 will get a free copy from me. So, Sharon, do you have any last words you want to share with the Bamboo Pack audience on any piece of advice? I mean, you've given so much already. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you wish I would have?
Well, let me see. I'm thinking here. This is one thing I will say. I want to throw this out about some of the stories that are in The View. Sometimes the gentlemen, the men I write about, are probably not always seen in the kindest light, but some of the other men that I write about they come across as maybe gruff, but underneath they are teddy bears. There's a tenderness in the men that I write about in these stories. That men, because this is not just a book for the gals, but it's also for men, and it's told from different points of view. Some from the male, some from the female, some from the narrator. There are good people everywhere. We just have to sometimes dig a little bit deeper to find it. So hang in there, do the best that you can at whatever you decide. College, as I mentioned, isn't for everybody. So don't fret if you don't have a 4-year degree. I quit working on my PhD a long time ago, and because I thought I wanted to be called Dr. Sharon, and I realized that was more ego than anything else talking. So swallow your ego sometimes. Do what you have to do. Apologize to those that you feel that you should apologize to. Ignore the people who put you down when you know they're just simply jealous. And go on with your life and enjoy this beautiful day. Right here, it's the 10th of November. And the sun is shining, the birds are singing. God really is in his heaven, and all is well, however you see God.
I can't imagine a better way to cap off today's podcast. Thank you. Sharon, I just want to take the time to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being such an inspiring guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast.
And thank you for this opportunity. Thank you so much. I very, very much appreciate it. It means everything to me.
Well, if we can spend just a minute or two on the phone after we're done recording, that would be great. I'm going to wrap up. Bamboo Pack members out there, please smash that like button. This was a great episode. Share it with 3 people so they can get the wisdom and experience that Sharon shared with us today. And please write us a review, rank us, however you'd like. I just want to take the time to thank you all. You guys are the greatest podcast audience in the entire world. The letters we get are inspiring to me. They're heartfelt and warm. I can't thank you enough. In the meantime, we will talk in a few days. In the meantime, get out there and sculpt your life. Sculpt until you find that true peak identity inside. And then when you find it, live it. I appreciate you all.